For the artists, for the passionate. Welcome to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. I am your host, Jade Black, and today we are kicking off, continuing, who knows what episode order we're doing here, but we're talking about emotions. And what I've done to make this series is a take of philosophy I really hate from acting about the 5 core emotions, and done an episode per one of those. There may well be more coming because I'm enjoying doing them so far. I did swap out envy though, and this is the one I swapped it with, is writing about being calm and serene and all of those things that kind of don't really happen in the term ones, but we're gonna give it a go anyway. Envy is an episode that I did consider doing, but it just doesn't really come up enough in the determined ones for me to do a full episode on it, although I could do that as part of the lowdown with some others, maybe, in the future. But since this is somewhat of a more, tenuously more of a craft-based thing, but anyway, as always, I feel the need to say, I'm not here to give writing advice, I'm here to talk about my craft, my process, what works for me, all of that jazz. That's the deal. So, where do we start? Let's start with food, because I'm hungry. There are characters I have who get a lot out of things like cooking, so Haru and Coney are the really obvious two. Haru really enjoys cooking, be that doing sweets or savoury. Haru does have a sweet tooth. He spends years, and literal years, perfecting a shortbread recipe, and he gets a lot of joy out of that. And Ai Nagashima can tell you it's very good shortbread. But Haru gets a lot out of making things like tempura and ramen and all those sorts of things too. Coney does also really enjoy cooking. So he's much more meat heavy on food. Haru is, I may have mentioned this before, sort of semi-vegetarian. Coney's very meat heavy, and it's one of the few things we see him do that really calms him down. I think for both of them it's something that they sort of have to just focus on a lot of the time, make sure things are cut right, cooked correctly, particularly with Coney and meat, and, cooking times and all of that. It can be quite hard to think of other things at the same time, depending on exactly what you're making, so I think that helps them a lot. Then we're going to move on to second topic already, bloody hell, look at me go. I'm going to talk about drinks, and this isn't necessarily alcohol, this does also cover tea and things like that. I do have a full episode on tea, but for someone like a good cup of tea, or there are a few scenes in Black Executioner where he's drinking cocoa, that just having a moment with a hot drink can really calm a lot of my characters down. For someone like whether that be a good cup of tea or cocoa, either of those will work. Curtis, his preference is chai, although cocoa will also work just fine. For someone like Haru or Atsushi, it's definitely more of a tea thing. I can't see Atsushi with cocoa, to be honest. But yeah, hot drinks can really just help calm people down. With someone like Haru, one thing he does do on page in Miss Nakagami is he has tea in the bath one time, which personally I think would feel horrible trying to drink fluid while in the bath, but Haru likes it. Getting on to alcoholic drinks, this is something that both Isamu and Hanzo enjoy doing. So for Isamu, this is more making drinks. He enjoys making cocktails and things and experimenting with that. He finds that very fun, and he finds it very satisfying, if he makes like a really, really good cocktail, and he's like, yeah, that's something that, again, it's the concentration for him. I think that helps. With Hanzo, he just drinks. And Hanzo's a sleepy drunk, so that's kind of the deal there. I think it distracts him from the world a bit. Because if anybody's going to be stressed by the state of the world. So let's move on to a little bit, staying on the culture thread, let's move on a bit to art and literature, because I do have characters who are artists. You would think that Isamu would maybe be on this list for art, sort of calming him down, being a musician, but that's not really the case for him. Writing songs and things like that really gives him energy. It kind of does the opposite. For someone like I paint with inks, and that's something that he finds very relaxing. Again, it's very much just you have to concentrate thing, but also that there is a lot for him in just absorbing himself in his imagination. I does have an overactive imagination, so something like that helps him a lot. And Hanzo is a bit of an artist with making hair ornaments. And this is a very sort of traditional, it's about making them out of silk and wires and like bending wires and wrapping silk around them. Like, it's super, super time consuming and super intricate. And Hanzo, it's not something he does very often, and he doesn't have a lot of time for it as much as anything. And he might make like a petal here or a leaf there, and it takes him like days or weeks to finish one. But he gets a lot out of that, and it is, again, it's the concentration thing. He can't really think about anything else while he's doing it, and he does actually design his own as well once he gets the hang of it and makes it, sort of figures out how his own designs would work. And I think what we're noticing already, what I'm noticing, is just none of them have any chill. They can't just relax, they have to concentrate on something to relax. I wonder where they get that from. But let's keep on the art thread for the moment and talk about literature in particular, because there are a lot of readers. Really, Hanzo should probably be top of the list here. He loves few things more than getting really wrapped up in a good book. And Koni is very much the same with that. If he needs to relax, the first thing he goes to is picking up a book, because Koni again gets very stressed by the state of the world, so escaping to somewhere completely different, I suspect Koni's a bit of a fantasy reader, that really helps him. And I does very much do this as well. He likes to escape to something just a bit happier. He's gonna hate me for saying this, but he's a romance reader. And he just wants to read about happy, sappy things, and that it quiets things down in his brain a little bit. For someone like Curtis, literature's a bit different. He does read a lot of fiction, but Curtis gets a lot out of reading about mythology. He is a mythology dork. Kind of his thing. It's a bit of a comfort for him. It's something he's done for a long time. It's the sort of comfort read type thing. All the myth stuff for him is very much comfort reading. And here's a character who I believe I've mentioned before. I might be saying this wrong, so if you know how to pronounce it, and correct me, please. A character called Womo. And he is actually a writer. So what he gets out of writing it's his way of getting things out of his system, and he's not that great at getting to sleep. I suspect he's like me in the sense that he writes before bed to, in his case, calm himself down. That doesn't work for me, but time. We're going to move away from the culture side of things. I'm already undermining myself, and actually we're kind of staying on it, but in a different facet of things. And we're going to talk about exercise. And I've split this into sort of mental and physical exercise. We're going to go on to physical exercise first. And it shouldn't be surprising, this is something that my military characters get a lot out of. And again, I don't know that this is a concentration thing. So, for what it's worth, I'm talking about Ai, Shinichi, and Danath. This isn't necessarily a concentration thing so much as it is escapism in the same way that literature can be for people, particularly someone like Hanzo. Because again, it's sort of all you can concentrate on is, okay, just like one more chin up, one more. Actually, let's do 10 more of X thing or Y thing, or that sort of absorption in that is something that those three get a lot out of. When it comes to mental exercise, that's very much Hanzo, Isamu, and Helga's domain. Hanzo, I sort of touched on that with the hair ornaments and how he designs and makes those, and there's a lot of mental exercise there. But I suspect Hanzo is one of those people that does, like, maths for fun. Like, legitimately, I suspect he picks up a maths textbook every now and then and just works through it for fun. Because getting a maths problem right for him is satisfying. It's sort of, I don't know whether it reminds him a bit of being a kid, because maths was his best subject. I mean, that's pretty obvious from what I just said, but maths was something he always really enjoyed as a kid, so I do wonder if that sort of factors into things a bit. With someone like Isamu, it's more of an analysis of song lyrics or poetry or something like that. Is one of those things he really gets a lot out of. Because I think he finds it frustrating if he hears the song lyrics or poetry and he doesn't get it. I think that bugs him. So he'll go away and he'll spend time really analysing it, and then once he gets it, it's that, oh, I understand moment. So whether that's particular Serenity thing, or whether that's dealing with something that's stressful thing, not quite sure, but I say it counts. Helga's another one of those people who, like me, I imagine she would enjoy solving logic puzzles and things like that for fun. So I can absolutely see her really enjoying something like Kakura, which is a Japanese number puzzle for what it's worth. I was going to say it's somewhat similar to Sudoku, but it's not really. I don't really know how to explain it without you already knowing what it is. I suspect she'd get a lot out of things like that, because again, for that sort of thing, it's the concentration to distract from everything else. If you can't focus on anything else, that calms you down a bit. This recreation topic that I wanted to go on to next, I'm not quite sure what I meant by this, so we're gonna wing it a little bit. So with Ai, Deneth, and Shinichi, this for them is very much joking around and or playing little games in a small group. So someone like Ai, we see him on page in Black Executioner playing something like blackjack. No, it is blackjack, but I don't know which form it is, because canonically in the world of the Determined Ones there are different forms of blackjack within each nation. So what's called Malison Blackjack might actually be known to us as Pontoon or something like that. I don't know, and I don't really care about the differences, to be honest, because everybody seems to have a different set of rules for Blackjack anyway. But that's something that I and Danath in particular get a lot out of, just like little card games and things like that. That's, for them, fun, but again, I think it's the concentration to relax thing. I can absolutely see someone like Ai playing solitaire. I suspect he probably does, and I've just never seen him do it. But a lot of the bantering that those three do, because they're all very much that person, that is also a way for them to calm down. It's a sort of laugh or you cry type thing, making each other laugh to calm each other down and that sort of thing. It's why I get along so well with both of them. There's a real solid foundation of their friendship. And then for Hanzo, Isamu, and Haru, I think the track I was meaning to go down with this was more just being in a busier environment, being just more generally social in maybe a more relaxed sort of way, as opposed to being social and doing something, like playing a game, just, just hanging out with somebody. I think those three find that very relaxing. They get a lot out of being around other people. I did touch on this in a different episode, maybe. They get a lot out of just sitting with somebody and just talking about nothing in particular. That's definitely a big thing for Isamu. One thing I do want to bring up with Isamu in particular as well, this is something I found out very recently, as in 3 days ago. One thing Isamu is actually kind of a bit of a nerd about is I genuinely don't know whether this classes as astrology or not, because I know jack shit about any of this, is constellations. Isamu gets a lot. One of the things he does, and this is sort of a comfort activity for him, is like finding constellations in the night sky, and he knows all the symbolism and everything. Does that count as astrology? I don't know. Like, genuinely, I don't know. But that is something I found out about him recently that feels worth a mention. I guess it's a somewhat related topic to talk about religion. Talking about religion in public, but this isn't necessarily being religious or anything like that. This is, for Curtis, more about mythology. I did touch on this a little bit earlier with him, reading a lot about mythology. But Curtis does take a big grounding point in Malazan myth. And I suspect he does. I don't know this yes or no particularly yet. I will find this out in time, I'm sure. I suspect he does base some of his beliefs around Malazan myth, and there is an element of some form of religion there for him. Not that he'd ever talk about that, being a diplomat as much as anything. I suspect he does find legitimate comfort in everyday applications of myth. So, one thing that is mentioned in myth is how the animal fox, because it's all very animal myth, is that there's a desert fox, and that's supposed to be the paragon of joy. And I do suspect that anytime Curtis sees a fox, he does feel that. If he saw really any animal from any of the myths, I suspect that would bring him some semblance of comfort, because it sort of triggers the comfort thought pattern about myths and all of that for him. So spirituality I've separated out from religion because they can go hand in hand, but in the case of Womo and Hanzo they don't. This is much more... You will probably be surprised to hear this in relation to Hanzo. This is things like meditation. Because Hanzo is actually a really big proponent of this, and you know what? Shinichi is too, so we're going to add him on here. All three of these men really get a lot out of spirituality and trying to form a deeper connection with the soul. This is very much something that Hanzo does, and Womo as well. Shinichi, forming a deeper connection with the soul, not quite sure yet. I don't think he does it to the same extent that either of the other two do, to be honest. But it's something that they not only find fascinating, but something that really relaxes them as well. Something like meditation is so inherently that. If it works for you, I'm aware that it doesn't for everybody. But forming a deeper connection and really understanding more about that is something that really helps them. And one thing I do want to talk about that's maybe a little bit left field is how achievement can calm people down. And this is something that is very much Haru and Hanzo's realm, and this is somewhat symptomatic of working in politics. Because they all have such a huge fear of failure that success isn't necessarily something that brings them joy, though. Because for someone like Haru in particular, working in human rights, success doesn't equal joy for him, necessarily. It's much more about, thank fuck this thing is fixed. Like, okay, I can just sleep that bit easier at night now, knowing that this is going to be fixed, this is solved now. I can just, these people are no longer oppressed in this way, or this injustice is going, all the mechanisms are in place for that to happen, and that's very much the same for Ai and Hanzo as well, though not necessarily on the same topic. It's not necessarily a joy that they get out of achieving something, so much as, thank fuck this problem isn't a problem anymore. But I think that's about all I have for this one, so it's actually not that much of a chonker, which is surprising, but oh well. So let's move on to the wee plugs I do at the end. If you are published or on the way, please do get in touch. I would like you to do that via email. There are probably still legacy episodes being uploaded saying you can do that via Twitter, but please don't. Jade42black@gmail.com is the place to email. Indie and Self-Pub are the people I want to hear from most. If you're Trad Pub, that doesn't necessarily mean I won't talk to you, though. There is a list of things I want to know in the description. Please do read that first and include that in the initial email so I don't have to give automatic no's if and when I get inundated, because that's crap for everybody. It's the deal. Doesn't have to be adult, doesn't have to be a particular genre, doesn't have to be a novel. Just bring in whatever you got, and I'm sure it's interesting. So let's talk about it. If you want to find where I am elsewhere, if you're looking in particular for the podcast home, which you probably are, that is Instagram. What did I just say? That is Instagram. I am Jade_Black21 on there. On Instagram, what you'll find is advance notice of what the episode for the week is going to be, little highlight soundbite teaser reels, and all sorts of other things that I'm still experimenting with and probably always will be experimenting with, so you never quite know what you're going to get. Come join the fun over on Instagram. If you're looking to know more about my writing, that is Twitter, JadeBlack21. But that's about all I have for now, so you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing so you don't miss future content. Copyright Jade Black 2023.